Because again, our lives are run by systems, run by habits. So if you can take control of these habits and understand how to manipulate them to your benefit to get to, your desired destination, if you will, or desired being, then ultimately it's going to help you get there. But if we just stay prisoners to our habits, not realizing what these habits are or how they're affecting us, we're never going to get to where we want to go. What's going on, everyone? Welcome to another episode of the Success Spectrum podcast, where we dive deep into the world of finance, entrepreneurship, and personal development. I'm your host, Kadeem McLean, sharing stories and insights to help you on the pursuit of becoming the next best version of you. So today, what we're going to dive into is building better habits, right? And there's a few books, a few resources we can talk about. But first, I want to start with a little bit of a personal story. Around the age of 10, grade 5, I believe I'm 10, you're 10 in grade 5. Before that, leading up to grade 5 and including most of grade 5, I was a student who didn't care much about their grades, right? Elementary school, I went to a Catholic school. Elementary school, you don't really fail, right? I think your parents have to give approval. I remember hearing that back in the day. Your parents have to give approval for them to hold you back a grade. I didn't care for my grades, right? And I'm not encouraging that. I'm just saying I didn't care for my grades. But so there were some students, right? People who you would consider friends, I guess, making fun of me for my grades and the fact that I didn't really care for them. And, my grades were close to the bottom of the class. But I made a decision that day, or one of those days in grade 5. And the decision was to do my work at school instead of talking and, chit-chatting during working hours. Let me get my schoolwork done so I don't even have to bring any homework home to do at home, because I wasn't doing homework. But if I do the work at school, I wouldn't even have to bring it home, and I can enjoy the rest of my night, my evening, right? As a kid, you want to go out, you want to play, you want to maybe play some sports, play basketball, tag, whatever it might be. But if you have homework, it kind of interrupts that, right? So I said, okay, cool. I'm going to prove to you, these kids that were making fun of me, and more importantly, prove to myself that I'm smart enough to get good grades. So I made a decision, right? And there was a few things in there. So the trigger, essentially, or the cue, was for me to, at school, during school hours, that's the trigger. It's school hours, I'm at school. The action or the routine, do my schoolwork, pay attention, ask questions, get the schoolwork done. The reward, I get to enjoy the rest of my night, right? The rest of my day once I leave school. I can go out and play. I can go out and play some sports or play a game, whatever I want to do. All right. So I made a decision that day to change my habits. And that led to me being selected actually the next year for something called Tim's Camps now. That's what it's called. And for anybody who's familiar with that, it's the Tim Hortons Camps, the Tim Horton Foundation. And that I was with them for a few years of my life, right? 6 years as a camper. And I worked for them, and I still do things here and there for them or with them. And without that experience, I wouldn't be who I am today, the experience of attending camp. So that one decision, that one habit that I changed, which followed me the rest of my school experience, changed the trajectory of my life. And that's how important and powerful habits are. One decision, one habit, one change can literally change the trajectory of your life. You've heard this before. A 1 degree change or a 1 degree difference can add up over time and literally completely change where you're going, where you're heading. So the point of this episode is to, first of all, if you're not aware, make you aware of the importance of habits, but also to get you to challenge yourself in terms of what habits you currently have. Do an inventory. What habits do you have right now? Are they good habits? Are they bad habits? We have, I'm sure, both good and bad habits. But what are those good habits? Can we lean into those? Can we stack anything on top of those, which we're going to talk about? Or those bad habits, what can we do? Can we replace them? Can we, flip them so that it becomes something good? All right. So that's a personal story of mine. And just again, a story to trigger, or rather highlight, the importance of habits. Now, what I talked about was the trigger or the cue, the routine, which is the actual habit itself, and then the reward. So this is something that was actually in the book, The Power of Habit by Charles Duhigg. And it was a powerful, powerful book. One of my favorite books. And the reason why, again, is because he talks about this thing called the habit loop and how important habit is. And before I really go there, I just want to talk about quickly the fact that our lives arguably are run by systems, right? In the book, he also talks about grocery stores and the way that they're set up, right? All the produce in the front, if you will, the way that it's aligned is very strategic. It's not aligned a certain way just for the sake of randomness. It's aligned a certain way because they know how people like to shop and how they think, right? The perishables in the front and so on, right? So when you go into the shower, you have a certain routine that you do. When you brush your teeth a certain way, typically the same way every single time. When you're putting on clothes, you're getting ready in the morning, you have a routine that you follow, a system. So essentially what I'm getting at, and what he mentions in the book, is habits run our lives. Habits run our lives. And if we're not aware of these habits, then we're really just I don't like to say victim, but we're prisoners to these habits is what I'll say. But once you become aware of these habits, now you can take control and do something a little bit different, right? So the habit loop, again, is the trigger. So for example, you eat breakfast every morning, let's say. What is the cue for that or the trigger? Well, it's morning. You're about to maybe head out for work and you need something to fuel yourself, right? So you might grab an apple, you might grab eggs, whatever it is you eat for breakfast. The trigger is, again, it's morning time. I just woke up, I just brushed my teeth, or whatever the case is. I need to get some fuel in me. That might be the trigger. The habit, of course, or the routine is to get that food in your system, whether it's an apple, whether it's, water you start with, or whatever your routine might be. The reward, maybe you feel better equipped to go throughout your day with more clarity of thought and the proper fuel and energy you need to get your work done, right? So that essentially is the habit loop in a nutshell. Now, how can you build positive habits? Well, one of the things about this, let's talk about first replacing bad habits. I want to go there first. So once you understand the habit loop, you can look at the cue or the trigger in terms of, why am I doing this? Why is this habit or routine? Why am I falling into this and doing this regularly? Well, the trigger is the reason for that. Your brain it's set up in a way to conserve energy. So it's going to try to conserve as much energy as possible, right? It's very survival. So it's going to come up with these systems and patterns. And if you have certain triggers that ultimately you continue doing the same habit, once this trigger is in place, then you're going to continue doing that habit until you disrupt it. So the trigger, for example, let's say, let me try to think of one for you. Let's say 8 p.m. hits, right? Your trigger might be to turn on the trigger is 8 p.m., right? Nighttime, getting ready for bed, whatever the case might be, but it's your wind down trigger, right? Or your trigger to wind down. Your routine or the actions that follow it, your habit, might be to turn on the TV and, watch a couple episodes of a show, right? 10 o'clock hits, now you get ready for bed. But what you could do if you want to change that and, change the trajectory of your life and do something a little bit different, instead of, I'm not saying don't watch TV, but instead of 8 p.m., go watch TV, maybe you change it to where you want to learn a new language. Whatever app you use, however you go about doing it, that's your choice. But 8 p.m. hits, let me open up my app, Duolingo, for example. Babbel, whatever it might be. 8 p.m. hits, I'm going to do that, and then I'll watch TV. So the same trigger, 8 p.m., but now instead of going straight to watching TV, you're doing something a little bit differently by learning that new language, by opening up your app, opening that book that you're reading or whatever it might be to learn that new language. And then once you're done that, then you go and watch TV. So you still get that same reward of relaxing, but you also get an additional reward, if you will, because now you're also taking steps towards learning that new language you've always wanted to learn, right? So that is an example of how you can turn a quote unquote bad habit. Watching TV winding down isn't necessarily bad, but you're also adding something in addition to that by learning a new language, right? Drinking. Let's say you have a habit of drinking more than you know you should, right? The trigger Who knows? Might be a night out with friends, or, stress, whatever that trigger might be. So instead of, again, doing that same routine, ultimately you have the trigger, the cue, you have the routine, and then you have the reward. What you want to change or adjust is the routine. The trigger should stay the same, or can stay the same. That's the best way to go about it, essentially. Keep the trigger the same, but every time that trigger comes up now, you change the habit, the routine, but it should give you ultimately a similar reward, right? Otherwise, it doesn't make sense. But it should give you a similar reward, and then that can help you to stick to it. Of course, doing it after a certain time frame. I think they say it takes about 21 days to form a habit, right? So that trigger comes, whatever it might be, time out with friends, stress, whatever it might be. That routine is what you can change. So instead of going to grab a drink, grab a notepad and mark an X on it. Something, right? Something that can lead you to that same reward ultimately after a certain amount of time. Whatever it needs to be. I'm not a psychiatrist or anything along those lines, or a therapist, but I'm just going off of the information that I've heard and received and experienced myself, right? Like I told you with that, the story of when I was 10 and I made that decision to actually start doing my homework. Well, eliminating my homework because I was doing my schoolwork in school. Therefore, I can enjoy the rest of my day. And of course, the reason I got to attend camp, I didn't say, is because the next year I was one of the top 2 most improved students in the school. So then the principal selected me to go to camp based off of that and some other factors, of course. But again, that wouldn't have happened if I didn't change my habit. Same trigger, same cue, habit changed, similar reward. Ultimately, honestly, a better reward, but similar reward. All right. So back to building positive habits, you can do something called implementation intentions. So you plan it out, right? A lot of us might want to go to the gym, work out, get healthier, right? Physical activity. So what you could do is, during the pandemic, actually, I did this to a degree, which is I wasn't able to go to the gyms. Gyms were shut down, but I still wanted to get some type of physical activity. So what did I do? Certain times in the day, I said, okay, 12 p.m., I'm going for a walk. 12 p.m. came every day, I go out for a walk. Whether it's a 15-minute walk, a 30-minute walk, a 45-minute walk, that time in the day, my trigger came. I then did the activity or the routine, which was go for a walk, get some sun, and the reward was amazing, right? I can't go to the gym necessarily because the gyms are shut down, but I could still get out, get moving, get my blood flowing, my heart pumping, get some sun. And, instead of being depressed inside, locked in without really much sun, I can get out, get that vitamin D, get that energy, feel the environment, if you will, and get the blood moving. So it's a similar reward to going to the gym. I couldn't do it at the time, go to the gym, but I was able to plan it out and say, okay, 12 p.m. every day, I'm going for a walk. And I did that. That's implementation planning. So you plan it out based off your schedule, whatever the case might be. I'm going to do X, Y, and Z because this is something I want to do. I want to get ultimately to over here being healthy, being, more fit, whatever it might be. And so this trigger, this routine, this reward, right? That's one of the reasons, honestly, I keep water around me, because whenever I have my water with me, I'm drinking it. I'm sipping it throughout the day. And I end up drinking a lot more water that way. And typically by certain times in the day, I make sure I finish at least 1 bottle. So 3 bottles a day, 4 bottles a day, because 8 or 9 a.m., I'm done 1 bottle, right? By lunchtime, 12 o'clock, I'm done another bottle. By the time I get home, let's say if I'm at work, around 4 o'clock, I finish another bottle. And then the last one, of course, shortly before going to bed, 6 p.m., whatever the case might be, 7 p.m. But I have it set out throughout the day. So there's a trigger. There's the routine, which I need to make sure I finish that bottle of water. And of course, the reward is I feel better, healthier, and so on, right? The benefits of drinking water. Another positive habit or way to build positive habits is something called habit stacking. And habit stacking is you have a routine already, you have a habit, and it's probably a positive habit. You keep that in place, but instead of just, okay, so back to this example with learning that new language. So 8 p.m. comes. Instead of just learning that new language now, You 8 p.m. comes, that's your trigger. The reward is you learn that new language for 15 minutes, however long it might be. And then after that, you read a book. It still helps you to wind down, and it helps you to, get into that state of calmness that you can go to bed. And you're actually limiting your screen time, which is good for you. But now instead of just replacing the habit or the routine, you are actually, learning that new language, and then you go read a book afterwards. Still helps you to wind down and get that reward. So that is habit stacking. You stack a habit on top of an existing habit. And this is another way to, of course, build up to what you want. Because again, our lives are run by systems, run by habits. So if you can take control of these habits and understand how to manipulate them to your benefit to get to, your desired destination, if you will, or desired being, then ultimately it's going to help you get there. But if we just stay prisoners to our habits, not realizing what these habits are or how they're affecting us, we're never going to get to where we want to go. Me recording this podcast, this was a habit I created. It was an implementation plan, right? I came up with the idea in my mind, because of course, as I've said in my first episode, I've been wanting to record a podcast forever. Didn't have the space. At one point I did, but it didn't work out and so on. So here we are now. I said, okay, Sundays, I'm going in and I'm recording. I'm going to figure out how this boardroom setup is, and I'm going to record Sunday mornings. The trigger, Sunday morning comes. The routine, get up and go. Set up the studio, if you will, to record. I record, and then I move on, right? The reward, of course, I have the episode recording. It's a good feeling, essentially, because, I'm getting done what I set out to do and following that habit or routine. So again, you have certain things you want to complete or get done in your life. What is the trigger for you? What is the action you're going to take or the routine you're going to do to get you to that desired reward? Because every step you take, again, is getting you closer to that desired reward. All right. Resources. This is a book I haven't read yet, but I've talked extensively with some people who have read it. Atomic Habits. Actually, I listened to a synopsis, but I didn't actually read the book yet. Atomic Habits. I don't remember the author, so I might remember, but I don't remember entirely, so I'm not going to say it. But that's a powerful book from what I've heard. Like I said, The Power of Habit by Charles Duhigg is another powerful book. There's a lot of books and resources out there talking about habits. There's a course from Uncle Eric Thomas. I always call him Uncle E.T. That's just how I reference him anyway. We don't have a personal relationship, but there's a course that he has called Habit Stacking. You can go online. I think it's etinspires.com, or just search him up on Google. You'll find it. There's resources out there. There's apps that help you. I used to use one called Fabulous. There's apps that help you to come up with routines and stick to these routines to, again, get to that desired reward or destination you want to get to. So again, use these resources that are available to you, and of course have accountability partners. You want to shoot me a message. I can be your accountability partner if you want me to be, right? My social media links are down below. You can reach out to me there, or you can leave comments on the YouTube videos, however you want to go about it. But change your habits and you will ultimately change your life. Change your habits and you will ultimately change your life. All right. So that's it for me. Hopefully you found this episode beneficial, helpful, and you feel more empowered to, take an inventory of your habits, to build positive habits and to replace the bad habits with good ones. All right. So again, this is the Success Spectrum Podcast. I thank you for tuning in. If you like the content, you know what you can do. Like, subscribe, share it with somebody. If you want more information like this, my social media links are down below in the description. And ultimately, join me next time, of course, on sharing more insights and stories. But just remember this, as I always say, every single step you take is a step closer to becoming the optimal version of you. All right. So until then, keep moving forward towards the optimal version of you. We'll see you next time.